The Goldman Sachs 10,000 Women program provides business skills to female entrepreneurs worldwide.
If you train one woman, you train a nation, so that woman will give back to her community what she has learned.
See more women creating economic growth.
There are big churches, and then there's the Yoida Full Gospel Church here in Seoul, South Korea. It's the mother of mega churches. There are big churches, and then there's the Yoida Full Gospel Church here in Seoul, South Korea. It's the mother of mega churches with the largest congregation in the world. On a typical day, 200,000 will attend one of 7 services, along with another 200,000 or 300,000 watching them on TV in adjoining buildings or satellite branches. While some other churches may be losing members, this one just keeps growing. The main sanctuary here holds 21,000 worshipers, packed to the rafters, 7 times every Sunday. Each service has its own orchestra, its own choir, its own pastor. There are hundreds of assistants. There needs to be. Each service is translated into 16 different languages for visitors. Karen Kim is a pastor with the church's international division. She says she was shocked when she first moved here from Australia.
I think when you've got people this size, like, you have to have structure and you have to have organization, because otherwise people would be getting killed. Like, you can't just let it all just take care of itself. Like, there has to be like organized rosters of volunteers and things like that to get people in and out of the service. Otherwise people will literally die and get crushed.
The level of organization here is striking. Senior Pastor Reverend Young Hoon Lee explains it this way.
Our church operates like orchestra. Every day we make perfect harmony and fantastic symphony.
Even though the first Christian missionaries arrived in Korea in 1784, the so-called Hermit Kingdom continued to be Buddhist until about 60 years ago. That was about the time Pastor David Cho founded what became the Yoida Full Gospel Church, which now has missionaries of its own in 67 countries.
People do not come to our church because I'm a holy person, I'm spectacular Christian. No, they come because I supply their need. I meet their need through the Word of God.
Actually, Pastor Cho is one of the most revered evangelists in Korea. He was a Buddhist until he rejected his religion when he was near death from tuberculosis. He says that's when Jesus Christ appeared to him in the middle of the night and told him to preach the gospel. So he did. When the country was suffering in poverty and desperation after the Korean War, he preached the gospel of hope through prayer.
Every morning at 4:30, people come to church and they pray for 1 or 2 hours. And all-night prayer meeting on Friday evening.
Prayer seems especially important to this congregation. Each day, buses leave the big church for the ride up to Prayer Mountain, which includes a sacred cemetery on a hillside. It overlooks a complex of buildings with a church, a hotel, and tiny individual prayer rooms barely big enough to kneel and pray, which some do for hours. From a distance, you can hear the sound of wailing coming from the top of the cemetery and people speaking in tongues.
It's very important to their faith, and speaking in tongues is a way that they communicate with God, and that they allow God to communicate through them, and it's evidence of the Spirit working in them and them being filled with the Spirit.
From only 5 members in 1958, Yoida Full Gospel, which is affiliated with the Pentecostal movement, grew to be the largest congregation in the world with over 800,000 members. Some satellite congregations have been released to become independent branches, although they're still connected to the big church. There's more than one reason Yoida grew so big and so fast, but Pastor Cho believes women have a lot to do with it.
God gave me the idea because till that time, women were despised actually in society. They were not given any important position. And the Spirit of the Lord said, why don't you use women? So I announced that I would start cell ministry and use women as a leader. And many men protested. They felt very bad about that. But I forced my idea. The women was very happy and they dedicated. They were excellent workers.
They make up the majority of the membership in the church, and they really do a lot of volunteering. Historically, in church history, Pentecostalism has been one of those areas and those branches, Christianity, that has been more open to women pastors.
One reason Yoita has grown so big is because of its fundamental message that if members give to God, He'll give them prosperity. The same message found in numerous megachurches in the U.S.
Many people are accusing me that I'm preaching the gospel of prosperity, but I'm not afraid of being accused, because if gospel could not bring prosperity to other people, suffering people, what can you do for them? Because gospel must bring prosperity in our spirit, soul, and body and lives. If gospel bring destruction to us, why should we believe in gospel?
But Pastor Cho says personal prosperity is good only if people become rich as well in their spirit and soul.
People try to bring happiness from their circumstances by being rich, by arriving their position in society. But those things soon pass away. They need an eternal hope that is coming from inside out, not from outside in.
Tithing is a fundamental part of church doctrine.
Most members give tithe to the church with 10%. With that money, we will help all the poor people in this society.
With so many members and so much in tithes, the church could be a powerful political influence in South Korea. But Pastor Lee says the church does not want to become politically active and instead puts more emphasis on the social gospel, helping the poor. Like this project outside the church where volunteers collect and dispense clothing for those in need.
They have a lot of those projects. I think not just in our church, but I think churches around the world are starting to realize that the debate between, the social gospel, just the gospel, you can't have one without the other, because you need both, and they need to work hand in hand if we're going to make a difference in our world.
In the 1960s, Korea was one of the poorest countries in the world with an annual per capita income of about $60. Today it's around $30,000. South Korea is prospering. Pastor Cho says he knows one reason why.
Jesus Christ. That is the only answer we can give. You come and try to study the reason of prosperity. You can't find out any reason, because we don't have a good politician so far. We don't have great business people.
And if Christianity is a factor in the prosperity of South Korea, Yoita is a significant contributor. 60 years ago, there were about 50,000 Christians in South Korea. Today, it's more than 10 million, and almost 1 in 10 were baptized in the Yoita Full Gospel Church. For Religion and Ethics News Weekly, I'm Lucky Severson in Seoul, South Korea.